My name is Dominik Stecula. I'm an assistant professor of political science at Colorado State University. I won the tenure track lottery. I very much know that it's a lottery. The scars of the job market are very much real for me. And one thing that I noticed while being a grad student is that increasing number of top-notch researchers need to kind of leave academia for various reasons, and people don't have a very good idea of how to go about it, what to do, how to kind of strategize, how to structure their program, and just kind of general ideas that are involved in kind of moving towards jobs outside of academia. So to try to alleviate this growing concern that so many people have, I reached out to some very nice people on Twitter, and they all agreed to join me today. So thank you very much for coming. I'll just briefly introduce all of you, but you'll say more about who you are, but just so that people know kind of who we have in a room here, because this is great. We have some amazing political scientists. We have Dr. Natalie Jackson. She's the director of research at PRRI. She's my favorite pollster to follow on Twitter. If you're on Twitter and you're not following Natalie, you're not living your best life. We have Dr. Laura Broner. She's the quantitative editor at 538, who has been essential in helping me understand the 2020 election results so far. So thank you for all of your tweets, Laura. Laura is absolutely the best Austrian in the United States since the arrival of Arnold Schwarzenegger in October of 1968. We have Dr. Sean Mazonder. He's a fellow at Data for Progress. He's a contributor to 538. His writing, his excellent writing, has appeared in a variety of sources, including The Economist, The Jacobin, Washington Post, etc. We have Dr. Stan Oklegia. Did I pronounce it right? Thank you, Stan. Stan is the research director for California YIMBY, and someone who has been doing tremendous research into campaign finance and election law. His hot takes on Twitter are as hot as they get. So if you're not following Stan, you gotta get on that. And last but not least, Dr. Charles Breton. He's my friend who's making this panel truly international. He's joining us from my former home of beautiful Montreal, Quebec. He's the executive director of the Center of Excellence on the Canadian Federation at the oldest and best think tank in Canada, Institute for Research on Public Policy. And Charles also worked for a major Canadian public opinion startup, Vox Pop Labs. So he has all kinds of experiences he can share with all of you today. So the way we're going to structure this is everybody will go in order to just to kind of say a few things about who they are, what their path has been, what kind of work they do. And then I guess I'll have some questions for you. Those are based on the questions that people have submitted. I have 12 pages of questions. It's actually pretty shocking how many people RSVP'd. We have 311 people. From all kinds of places all over the US, Canada, as far as Singapore, Australia, and New Zealand. So this is clearly showcases how much people need this information and kind of want to know more about these things. So thank you again for making this happen. So let's start with Natalie.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm glad to be here to chat with you all for a little bit. Well, I guess talk at you, more like it, since we're in webinar mode. So a little bit about kind of my pathway. I am currently the director of research for PRRI. That stands for Public Religion Research Institute. We go mostly by PRRI because we focus on quite a bit more than religion. We're really the intersection of religion, politics, and culture. I think our website says religion, public policy, and culture, but whatever. So I am almost 10 years post-PhD. Okay, I'm 9 years post-PhD. I'm aging myself a little too much there. I finished my PhD, excuse me, I'm having allergies, so my voice may go in and out. Um, I finished my PhD in December of 2011. I had, by that point, already moved on from Oklahoma and had started a postdoc at Duke the summer prior to that. So I was finishing my dissertation while I was postdocing. And the way I ended up as a survey research practitioner was I kind of fell into it, which is kind of funny. If you talk to a lot of survey researchers, this is actually really common, that we didn't actually intend to become survey researchers. It just sort of happened along the way. So when I was applying to grad schools, I had no idea what I was doing. My undergrad is from a small public university called West Texas A&M. It's in the big Texas A&M system, but it's one of the small ones in the middle of nowhere. Great place, great professors. I had no idea what I was doing when I applied to grad school. So I ended up at Oklahoma, and instead of a teaching assistantship, I was assigned as a research assistant at the in-house survey research center. And I was devastated by this because the entire reason I wanted to get a PhD was so that I could teach. So I really wanted that teaching assistantship. Anyway, long story short, I kept thinking I would do a couple of years in the survey lab. It still exists. You've never heard of it, likely, unless you're in Oklahoma, because they do a lot of statewide type things, a lot of state government surveys, you know, the type of stuff that these state level university survey research labs often do. So I ended up doing it the entire time I was in graduate school, and not leaving to ever go teach, although I did get teaching opportunities in other ways. And then when I got to Duke, I was no longer, I was a survey research consultant campus-wide, but I was no longer like doing my own surveys or doing actual on-the-ground survey research, and I missed it. I missed the, you know, just the process of putting surveys together. So at that point, I decided not to go on the academic market and to seek out different types of survey research. I was fortunate in that I had been connected to APOR, which is the American Association for Public Opinion Research, most of the time that I was in graduate school. So I knew there were tons and tons of PhD survey research people out working at a wide variety of places. So I had that knowledge kind of already in my head. So I had an idea of where to go looking for these things, and it ended up, my first stop was the Marist poll, doing state level polling for NBC and the Wall Street Journal in 2012 during that cycle. I think it's easy to forget, just a note that I've been thinking about this week, it's easy to forget how close elections have been in the past when we're living through this one. 2012 was, you know, we knew on election night what was going on, but it was a bit of a nail biter in the lead up. So just a reminder of that. And then I went to HuffPost for a while. If you follow me on Twitter, you know I've been talking about that some this season. I was active in the forecasting. I did the forecasting in 2016 and subsequently left political research for a little while after that, went to a nonprofit, did some management. It's the great thing about survey and quantitative skills, they transfer into a lot of different contexts very easily. And then realized I wanted to come back to doing political research, but not election research. So that's why I'm at PRRI now. You know, a couple of nuggets there that I'll highlight. That, you know, survey and quantitative skills do transfer. I'll just say that again. They transfer into a lot of different areas very easily. And the second is, if you're not in a situation where you've seen a lot of PhDs working out in other areas, they are there. You know, in the survey field, it breaks down to, you know, the APOR membership, I usually guesstimate is like a third academic, a third government nonprofit, and a third corporate. So, you know, there are lots of things out there, and I'm sure we'll get into more detail on that. So I'll stop there for now.
Thanks so much, Natalie. Laura?
That was really interesting. I didn't know all your background, and that was super fascinating. There's some stuff that's similar in mine, and some stuff that's very different. I also had no idea what I was doing, so I recognize that feeling. I mostly applied for a PhD in the first place because I didn't want to have to go find a job. That seemed hard, and I didn't know what I wanted to do, and it seemed kind of fun to get paid to, you know, keep studying, which I was good at. It turned out the PhD was not like that. I had to like do my own research and come up with a research agenda and execute that and spend years doing a thing that I didn't know beforehand that I really wanted to spend years doing. And so that was something that I came to grips with during the course of my PhD. You know, which led to some introspection. And I also didn't go in the academic job market at all because I realized that it was really hard and that it was going to be a lot of effort and a lot of, you know, pain. And I didn't want to go through that for a job that I didn't think was a great fit for me. And I also, you know, I mean, it's also, you're asking your advisors to write letters for you and all that stuff. And that was also something that I felt kind of weird asking people to do if I was not super committed to the idea of an academic job. So I finished my PhD in 2018. My PhD is actually from the London School of Economics. So it's a British PhD, which is a bit shorter, although I did take a bit longer to finish it. So it was probably comparable to an American PhD in the end. And I applied for a job at a political data company called Analyst Institute, which is where I worked in the run up to the 2018 cycle. So I applied for that, and I'd already started working there by the time I defended my dissertation. And I made that quite clear to my committee. In the UK, it's a bit different because the defense is like, you're not sure that you're gonna pass before you do it. Like they don't tell you to defend only when they agree that you're gonna pass. So I was a bit nervous, but that went fine. Yeah, and I was at AI until after the midterm, and then 538 was looking for a quantitative editor, and there were things about political data that I really liked. There were other things that I didn't like so much, and I was looking for a change. And so that was, I didn't really know if journalism would be for me. And I think that it's actually been a great fit for me, but I also had no idea that was gonna work out for me. So that was kind of a stab in the dark, and that went quite well. So I totally agree with Natalie that there's just so much about your skills that are useful. I mean, I've now been in 2 different fields after the PhD, and they've both, I mean, having the PhD is, I mean, I don't know if it's actually about the PhD or if it's about the skills that you learn, right? But like having those quantitative skills, having the research design skills in particular, like the understanding of sort of cause and effect and messy social science, real life effects and how hard they are to identify and how correlated they often are with a lot of other things, has been useful in covering everything, including, you know, this pandemic, for example, which obviously I had no idea I was going to be covering when I joined 538. But yeah, it's much more widely applicable. And I think for myself, I've realized that like the thing I'm interested in is sort of this intersection of statistics, political science or social science, and communication. So I think that the communication side doesn't, like, not necessarily journalism, but this idea of trying to communicate these concepts and trying to make them more generally accessible is something that I find very interesting and rewarding, because I think that what's intuitive what has become intuitive to us after years of you know, banging our heads against various books behind me, is not necessarily intuitive to many other people, but it should be, and it should be more accessible than it is. And I think that that's something that I continue to understand as I try to communicate with a wider audience, sometimes more, sometimes less successfully.
Thank you so much, Laura. Sham.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, I just, before kind of giving, I don't know, my spiel or background, I just wanted to emphasize that last part that Laura said. Like, there's a lot of quantitative concepts out there, you know, cause and effect, correlation, you know, bias, just like probability, like basic probability, that is actually very tough and counterintuitive. And one, I feel like, skill that you can develop throughout grad school is how do you communicate, especially when you're doing like your teaching positions. Like that's a great way to learn how to communicate these types of skills. And I think, like, you know, Laura's piece on post-treatment bias and administrative data, and how that relates to like a big problem, and explaining, you know, bias and police involved shootings of unarmed civilians. Like that is like, I thought that was a really great example of how the skills that you pick up in grad school can be applied to help people understand like a really, really important issue. Okay, so that's just to say that, you know, the skills you have are useful for communication. So I guess for me, so I just finished my PhD not very long ago. So I guess I'm more on the younger end of this batch. So I'll try to think about, like, give you a little bit more insight on things I did along the way to the PhD to get to kind of where I am. And so where I am right now, so I'm doing, so day job is essentially public opinion research in the corporate world in the tech sector. So it's a lot of kind of the, you know, bread and butter public opinion, political science type stuff you'd be doing, you know, analyzing CCS or whatever they called it now, CES. So if you've done that, like, you're well suited to do corporate or like industry social science research. And kind of on the side as well, so I particularly really enjoyed the writing part of the PhD, and so I really enjoy trying to kind of keep up with that. And, you know, I don't really have time at this point to like work on peer-reviewed type articles, nor do I really have any incentives to do that. But I do find the journalism component actually really, it's fun to do. It like kind of itches that social science part of me, and I think it's really needed, is to have, you know, more political scientists or social scientists or, you know, whatever scientists you view yourself as, being more forward and vocal and being confident about the types of skills that you have and how they are relevant for helping people understand the world in ways that are really impactful. So that's kind of an overview of what I'm doing currently, how I got to where I am. So my PhD was on much more kind of historical quantitative work around race and ethnic politics in the US, which is like not very friendly for, you know, a lot of industry gigs. But what I would say is that, you know, even though if you're not working on something that's like, you know, super relevant, like, I don't know, these days, forecasting or polling or whatever, is that the types of skills you learn along the way are actually really useful. So for instance, like, you know, the quantitative courses have been really helpful for, you know, the types of work I might be doing day to day in kind of the day job. And then the historical knowledge, the theory, all that stuff is really helpful for, you know, doing maybe some of the side stuff that I'm interested in as well. And so just to kind of also say is like, I think one strategy I would really think about is like, what are things that you can do along the way as you get your PhD that can serve as, you know, a portfolio as you start building up. So there are lots of outlets for that. I'm happy to talk about that in more detail, but that was kind of my trajectory throughout grad school. I wasn't totally sure if I was like 100% committed to doing, you know, academia full time. Turns out ex post, I'm not. And so along the way, I really tried to work on things that would kind of help, you know, open up outside options to me as well.
Thanks a lot, Sham. Appreciate it. Stan.
Hey everyone. So thanks all for being here and listening to us talk at you. So I guess my life story for academia is I started my PhD kind of a little bit later than most folks. So I already had lots of experience in the working world, like by the time I got in. And, you know, and part of what motivated me to get into academia in the first place was like not wanting to do this like kind of square ass 9-to-5 job lifestyle anymore. So I thought like academia was a good kind of like a cheat to get out of that, and it turns out it wasn't. But anyways, so I did my doctorate at UCSD, and my focus, like Dom said, was in campaign finance, right? So dealing with campaign finance data, like from basically year one, I was knee deep working with R and with Python and these large data sets. And like, I'd never really done that before, but I kind of got this like kind of itch to start doing computational social science research. And like, I don't know, I kind of liked it. And so I stuck with it a lot, right? Went in the job market in my last year of school and didn't get anything then, but I got this postdoc at Claremont McKenna, which paid pretty good and put me in LA, which was pretty awesome. And then the job market hit and I got some flyouts and they didn't pan out. And then COVID happened and the world stopped. So when the world stopped, I thought, like maybe this academia thing isn't going to work. You know, like Claremont's a small school and like they talk about, you know, you get a good idea of the financial picture of a university. And like when students stop showing up and paying dorm fees, the financial picture isn't so good. So I thought, like maybe I should look off into the other, you know, parts of the world and see what's going on there. I was interested at the time, obviously, in doing political work because, you know, if you have been in the United States or sentient at all, you've seen like kind of the disastrous political situation that we've all been living through. So I was interested in like, you know, helping that, rectifying that a little bit. Like I come from a family of refugees and I didn't want to be the second generation of refugee. I thought that would be kind of cool. So I started reaching out into my network of computational social science folks and just seeing for people like who'd worked at these sort of political institution or organizations and like places where like this computational skill set might be kind of worthwhile. You know, and this network that I had that I was building throughout grad school really paid off in that. So like people were like, talk to this person, talk to that person, get on this job board, you know, get on this email list, right? And so I started, you know, being more serious about that, taking some interviews. And meanwhile, like I had been involved in the YIMBY movement. If you don't know the YIMBY movement, like we're a movement that tries to make cities less shitty than they are by encouraging housing to make them less segregated, less expensive, greener, etc. Follow me on Twitter and you'll just get sick of me talking about urban planning and land use. I don't know, or don't if you don't like that. Anyway, so I'd been sort of like tangentially involved in that movement. In California YIMBY, which is sort of a statewide organization that lobbies in California to sort of create state level reform to sort of supersede local governments, was looking for a research director, right? And they were looking for someone that had experience with large data sets, that had a background in statistics, that was good at working with messy data. And I thought, hey, worlds are colliding. And so I applied and thankfully they liked me enough to give me a job, and I started there in August. And it's great because, you know, at California YIMBY, I'm doing a lot of the same sort of academic research that I would have done in an assistant professor's role, right? And it's pretty cool to be able to scratch that itch, you know? But like, one of the things that always kind of stuck with me in grad school is like, when you're doing your research, there's always like a gap in the literature or advancing knowledge or some sort of platitude that you hear. And it's really sort of hard to like, you know, see where your work makes an impact. And like in my current job, like I find it to be really awesome because you know, the work I do is looking at rectifying some deficiency in the law, right? And the work I do goes in front of legislators, and it goes to our lobbying team and our communications team, and helps, you know, identify a problem existing in California and fix it. And I think that's like really an area that academia was sort of deficient to me. So in a lot of ways, like, I don't know, like maybe it was a good thing that I failed in the job market as hard as I did. So, you know, like it put me into this position, which I think is really awesome, like really great. It's very fortuitous. Everyone else gave great advice about the sort of coursework you should do in grad school to, like, you know, make yourself, you know, how do I say, like, to sort of market yourself and like develop a good skill set and do that sort of thing there. But I wanted to talk about something else that kind of stuck with me and kind of screwed with me a little bit as I was making the transition. Like, there was a sort of mindset that you get indoctrinated into being a graduate student, right? And like that mindset is that, you know, getting an academic tenure track job is just sort of the be all end all. And if you don't get that, like your life just isn't worth living. And like being here on the other side, I'm here to tell you that's complete and utter BS, you know? Now, like, are you gonna hear me say that and all right, cool, now you're good? No, I mean, grad school is a process of indoctrination. It takes a little bit to get this out of your system. But like, I don't know, take it from me, right? Like, take it from all the people on this panel. We have very good, happy lives. In some ways, you know, kind of better than, like, I don't know, if I'd had a job like that made me move to like Burning Crosses, Mississippi or something like that, I probably wouldn't be very happy, you know? But like in my current job, like doing what I'm doing, living where I'm living, you know, doing the sort of work I'm doing, like it's really good. And it's a really, really great life. And so like, you know, despite what your peers might say, despite what your advisors might say, despite, you know, the people in your department might say, like, there is a giant life out there. There is a giant world out there. There's great organizations that are dying for your skill set all around the country, right? What you have, as everyone here that's spoken has said, is super high in demand. And sort of thinking about how to navigate your own passions, your own interests, right, and your own skill set into the needs of one of these organizations, like, it can really pay off. And so that's my piece.
Thank you, Stan. And last but not least, Charles.
One of us had to speak muted. That was me. So I wish I would have had that this kind of insight when I was thinking about all this, because I did not do like I did. I graduated in 2015 from UBC. That's where Dom and I met. And I did do the job market for 4 years, which was really stupid. So I did it in 2014 before I was done. I did it in 2015. Then I did a postdoc at Vanderbilt, short postdoc, which is short, for those who are not Canadian, is kind of the main federal funding agency. It's the biggest postdoc that you can get, basically. And went to Vanderbilt, moved my family there for a few months because that's the thing you do, right? You do a postdoc, and then after that, the jobs will happen. And then I, again, did the job market. I did have an interview that year. One thing I will say is that I was only looking for a job in Canada. That was my limit. It's important to have limit, and my limit was the whole country. But anyway, so I did do that, and then we moved back to Vancouver, where I was a sessional and did another kind of short postdoc for the Canadian election study that year. And then I decided that was enough. So I just sent messages out there to a network I had, and was lucky enough to be hired as the research director for Vox Pop Labs, as Dom said, which I would describe as a public opinion startup. Still exists. And one thing that's great when you decide that you're going to move out of academia is that you can also decide where you want to live. So I decided that I wanted to live in Montreal, which was my hometown. And when you decide to move out of academia, you can do that. You can just say, I want to live in my hometown, so I'm going to go looking for a job there, rather than having other people decide where you're going to live. And so after 2 years at Vox Pop, I decided that it was time to move to Montreal, and was hired as the executive director at the IRPP. other than, so I'll say just a bit more here. I think that one big difference that I have compared to people who have spoken before is that although I have a quant background, I moved out of that. Like right now, the position that I have is really not that. Right now, I've decided after my Vox Pop Lab jobs, which was really that one thing I really liked was to manage projects and to manage people. And so I just decided that that's what I wanted to do. And now the position that I'm in has no quant related content at all. And I'm fine with that. That's also something that I was fine with. So that's one thing that I wanted to add, other than what everyone has said about quant skills being easily marketable. That's true. But people doing their PhD, coming out of their PhD, people who do postdoc, you also need to learn how to frame those project management skills that you got in your PhD, because that's what you do. When you do a dissertation, you're managing a really big project. And that's important. When you're a TA or an assistant, when you're an RA and you're working on big projects, you're also managing projects. And those are skills that are really important and that are so easily marketable. So that's one thing that I wanted to add. The other thing I wanted to add, as I said at the beginning, is, to me, if I had one advice I would give, is that I think the sooner you make the decision that you're not going to be, you're not going to go into academia, the better. It's never too late, but the sooner the better, for various reasons. Not because it will influence what you do in your PhD, maybe it will, but it's really mainly psychologically. I think that's a good thing. If early on you decide I'm not going to go into academia, I'm going to finish my PhD, but I'm not going to go into academia, I think psychologically that's good, because you don't get to do the the super crushing experience of the job market. And I also think that the one thing that we need to mention, and that no one has really talked about yet, is money. If you do 3 years post-PhD as a postdoc or as a research assistant or a sessional, you're not making a lot of money. And you're basically deferring that money for in the future. And so if at some point you're gonna move out of academia, you better do it sooner rather than later, because that's money that you're never gonna get back. And I think that's an important point as well. So I'll just stop there.
Thank you so much, everybody. This is super helpful, and I'm sure everybody's appreciating all these insights. I know that a lot of these things I was thinking about as I was thinking of leaving academia, and nobody tells you these things. And just like Stan said, there's a certain amount of dogma in academia, and like you're not really allowed to kind of ask certain questions, say certain things. So so people, as I mentioned in the beginning, there's 320 people or so that RSVP'd, and they all submitted questions. And there's a lot of them. I tried to group them into different batches. A lot of them have to do with specific skills and kind of how to pitch them to potential employers. A lot of them have to do with kind of how to structure your time in grad school during your program, kind of what to do, what not to do. Some of them are very specific things about networking and work opportunities, and just some personal things as well. So I guess I can just start going off with some of the maybe let's start at the program level. Like a lot of you mentioned kind of quantitative classes. Is that really kind of all you can do as you focus on your grad school experience? Would you recommend any other things? Like people have been asking here questions about, for example, should you focus on publishing? Obviously, publishing is something that you need to do to get an academic job, but that probably doesn't really matter as much, although maybe it does, I don't know, in the outside world. So would you do, what would you say on that? What would you say about teaching? Obviously in some programs, teaching is encouraged, at others it's not. Is teaching something that's worthwhile, that should go on your resume? So these are some of the questions that people are wondering about. So I'll just throw it out there if any of you want to tackle any of these.
I guess I'll jump in on just like, how do you, like, just really tangible stuff you can do in grad school. Like, I don't really have any like really deep wisdom, but just like what are like specific like tactical things you can do. So like this is, I mean, the first part's going to be more relevant for the quantitative oriented people, but the rest will hopefully be applicable to those of you who don't consider yourselves that way. I mean, so like when you're working on a project, let's say you're collecting data, like put everything on GitHub and have a start working on a portfolio as soon as you can. Like if you have, you know, special functions you're using that you need for your dissertation, like turn it into an R package. Basically, like, I mean, when I was interviewing for like industry positions, like those are the types of things that a lot of places were looking for. Like, can you show that, you know, do you have like documentation of the quantitative skills? Like, can you prove to us that you have this? Because you know, it's really costly and time intensive for, you know, to go through like, you know, coding reviews or like coding interviews and all of that stuff. So a lot of places I've noticed have started switching to like just asking for your GitHub. So that's a really tangible thing you can do. Beyond that, if you're, I mean, in grad school, you have to write papers no matter what. Like if you, just to get like a PhD, you have to write at least 3 papers. And you'll probably be writing more if you're working on projects with professors or trying to publish. But my recommendation is like, whenever you have basically research that's, you know, ready to be sent to review or has been published under like a peer review process, you should always be writing up like, what is the op-ed version of this that I can communicate to people? Like that is something I really tried to do with my work, is like every time I wrote something, I would write the op-ed version of it and just see, you know, where could I land it and pitch it around. Because people, as I mentioned before, are really hungry for your perspective. They want to know, like, you study this thing in a lot more depth than what a lot of other people are doing. They want to know, like, what can I take away from this? And so every time you write a paper, write the op-ed version of it, like the 500 word version that's really digestible, and like pitch it around. And you'll be surprised where you can get. I mean, there's like outlets like Monkey Cage where, you know, that's specifically suited for or tailored toward academics, but there's also, you know, places like 538, The Economist, Washington Post, like other opinion sections that are really hungry for, you know, social science oriented work and communicating science to the broader public. So those are just like tactical stuff.
Thank you, Sham. And actually, I'll just ask a follow-up, because that kind of popped up in some of the other questions. But while you mentioned that, you have published in a variety of outlets, right? Jacobin, Washington Post, 538, etc. Like, how does one go about doing that? I know several people asked, like, do you just like email random people? Like, what's your process with that?
This might be maybe a question for Laura, but I guess I'll give the freelance perspective, which is like, first, it's going to be kind of rough because you're not going to know anyone and you're just going to have to pitch blindly. And I'm happy to give advice on like how to pitch pieces and like what makes for a good pitch. I mean, in my limited experience, there's probably other, you know, Laura can give the editor's perspective on that. But like, I would say like, first you just kind of have to shoot around blindly, but eventually, like once you land it somewhere, like some editor is going to be in charge of that, and you'll work with that editor and develop a relationship. For some things, it'll be like a one-off, and like maybe that editor relationship isn't, you know, the one that works for you, and some it like really works. And you should just kind of develop those relationships and continue pitching those editors that you work with. Because yeah, they want ideas, and you are the idea generator for them.
Thanks.
Yeah, sorry, if I can just jump in on that. I think that's exactly right. Try to be in your pitch, like try to be accessible. Like I sometimes get or see pitches from academics that are like, you know, oriented in the literature, and it's like, no one cares about the literature anymore, like outside of academia. you know, and be prepared to be turned down, right? I mean, a lot of editors are either like they've just had someone on staff write a piece that's sort of similar or whatever, or they just don't have time, or it's not personal at all, and there's just a ton of reasons why they might not want to move forward. But like, if you do, I mean, as Shem said, like manage to create that relationship, often that I think is very useful moving forward, and can lead to a thing where they think of you then as the person who like has experience covering that type of story. And so if that type of story comes up in the future, maybe they'll reach out to you as the person to maybe cover that, or have sort of this deep background on that, because, you know, journalists don't necessarily have a lot of deep background, like the kind of deep background that academics have in a certain subject, and that's always really helpful to have access to. Also, I think another thing Shom has done is like collaborate with writers like at 538. Like I think you work with Maggie. Like, you know, there's ways to like make your skills part of the equation, even if you're like less comfortable with writing, for example, or whatever. I don't do a ton of writing myself. I mostly do like analysis and editing. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. And just going back to this kind of thinking of your program and kind of how to structure it. I mean, many people mentioned, what if you don't have those quantitative skills? I mean, Charles kind of mentioned some of these other skill sets you can highlight. Any other panelists want to weigh in on that?
I mean, if I want to just add one more thing onto that, I mean, if let's say you don't do any quant stuff, presumably you're doing a qualitative dissertation. So you've interviewed people, you've done archival work, like those are all good skills it's not the same target. We're not necessarily talking about the same kind of industry, but those are great skills to highlight.
Okay.
Yeah, and I'll jump in. You know, if you particularly enjoy teaching, you know, there are opportunities to be in alternate academic positions like teaching and learning centers at universities, to kind of be not the support staff, but you know, have a non-academic position where you're still active in teaching. And you know, the same thing holds for qualitative specialties, like, you know, archival work is a good one. You know, there are job opportunities for qualitative researchers. One of the big areas that's kind of exploding, that's kind of survey public opinion adjacent, is user experience research. And in general, there is a quantitative aspect to that, but there's also a very, very substantial qualitative aspect to it. Because for user experience, you're interviewing people on what their experience is, and you're really trying to dig at that more qualitative type of information for whatever whatever you're user testing. So that is a growing area that I actually just know someone who used to work for me who landed a position in that. So it's pretty cool. It's pretty interesting work.
Let me also say, like, don't sell yourself short, right? Like, I mean, I think people on this panel, like, we sort of fell into the quant aspect just because, like, that was our thing and that's what we were interested in. But, like, if you're doing a dissertation, you probably know more than anyone else in the world about some subject, right? And that subject matter expertise is super valuable. Like, part of what I'm doing on my job is playing a lot of catch up around housing policy, housing law, land use law, zoning law. Like, there are people that know all of this stuff, and like maybe they're not as good of a coder as I am or something like that, but like you don't have to invent a new number or like write a new operating system from scratch in order to get a job. No, like there's demand for the knowledge that you've built up over the years.
Thanks, Dan. So kind of along those lines, you know, people have been asking, you know, should you structure your program with leaving academia in mind, which also just has this kind of connotation of, well, maybe is it worth doing a PhD to begin with? So does anybody want to weigh in on the kind of master's versus PhD? Does PhD bring any additional value, or is it viewed by potential employers as more of a drag on in the labor market? Like any insights along those lines, I think would be appreciated.
Oh, we have a problem with the dependent variable here, though, because
Yeah,
uh,
I selected on a DV, that's for sure. Yeah.
Because it's hard. Like I'm glad I did it. I think I mean, that's a personal choice, but I would say, like, if year 2 of your PhD you're thinking, I don't want to do this, I'm not sure it's worth it. I mean, it's a really personal choice at that moment.
Mm-hmm.
Like I don't know.
So from being out for a while and kind of making my own mistakes in this regard and kind of seeing what happens, you know, my very strong opinion is that a PhD is one of many ways to get expertise. If you walk out of a PhD program thinking I have a PhD, therefore I'm smarter than everybody else, and you walk into a non-academic context, you're going to have a bad time. Because all those other people have just as many, you know, have been working on expertise for what they're doing in a different way than you. Mm-hmm. That's not to belittle the PhD at all. You know, it's a huge accomplishment. You do it, you'd be very, very proud of it. But when you go into a work environment, you have to recognize that it's one of many ways to get expertise. I have very little respect for people who run around waving their PhD as if it's some credential that makes them more credible than everybody else. And you do see a lot of that. And just personally, and from what I've seen outside of academia, it doesn't work. You know, people don't respect that. So with that in mind, there are advantages to having the PhD. You know, we're seeing more and more tech companies, policy shops, you know, they want people with PhDs because they want the skills that you bring to the table. If you've gotten a PhD, you've shown that you can manage this gigantic process of a dissertation. You know, you've shown that you have gone really, really in depth into a topic. It shows that it shows a lot of really positive qualities that in some contexts people are looking for. If you get to a point, like if you don't like what you're doing and you're in your second or third year of it, you know, there are other ways to gain expertise. I think that's where I'll kind of put the period on that long and winding sentence, is there are other ways to get expertise. If you really enjoy the process of the PhD, do it, finish it. If you're close to finishing, finish it. But if you're only partway through and you're just miserable, life's too short for that. There are too many other ways to get expertise.
Thank you, Natalie. So just a note to the audience, if you have any questions, I'm going to continue asking them from what I've prepared, but ping us on Q&A, and I'm pretty sure I can actually let people speak as well. So just make yourself visible in chat and we can go from there. But for now, any other advice in terms of kind of how to get the max out of your program, other than taking as many stats courses as you can?
I think, like, well, I mean, on that last question about the PhD, like, I think we got to be real now. Like, there aren't as many tenure track jobs as there used to be. There will probably be fewer in the future. And like, departments were set up in this era in which like states had abundant funding and built new universities for population growth and new arrival. And so that there was, you know, a pot of gold at the end of the rainbow. But like, it's not really a question of like, should you not develop these skills because you're going to be a professor? Like, yeah, everyone wants to be a professor, man. But like, you know, not everyone's going to win that lottery. So like, having a backup in your pocket is something that, you know, you should be thinking about. Something I wish someone sat me down and like made me think about a little harder when I was like a third year or fourth year or something like that.
I think that's a really good point. I think that, at least for me, what was helpful is kind of like thinking about what I want. I mean, I know that's kind of obvious, right? But like, what parts of academia, if you are currently sort of on an academic track, like what parts of that do you enjoy? Do you enjoy the research? Do you enjoy the self-directedness of it? Because if really what you want to do is like, you know, have your entire freedom on your research agenda and just do whatever you want without like answering to people, then there are probably not that many options you have outside of academia, because most places, even if they'll pay you to do research, that, you know, they won't just pay you to do whatever research you want. They'll want it to be on like some method that might help them or make them money, or they'll want it to be on whatever, you know, the topics of the day are. My PhD, I forgot to say this in my intro, was on British history, which 538 weirdly doesn't want to publish anything on quantitative British history. I've tried, but you know, so that's, I mean, it's fine. I've gotten over my weird British history obsession, but like, you know, that's a kind of thing where you don't have that many other options. But in my case, I was actually quite happy to work on something that other people find interesting, and to have other people sort of not dictate the agenda, but sort of have suggestions and be like, oh, hey, you know, could you look into this question? Like, that's weird. Is there data on this? Can you like try and figure that out? Can you quantify how weird this is and relative to other weirdnesses or whatever? And like, I really, not only do I enjoy that, but I find that makes me feel more needed and more useful, rather than like just going off and reading a bunch of history books or trying to digitize a shitload of data that no one ever will use again because other people have maybe also digitized it or whatever, and there's only a total of 4 people in the world who even care. So that sort of, that went rambly, but like, you know, or if you really like teaching, then focus on like, you know, ways to do that. If you really like, you know, collaborating with other people, you know, that there are all sorts of components of academic research or of an academic job that I think, depending on what you enjoy, have different implications, and figuring that out for yourself is kind of a crucial thing, and something that I took way too long to do, but I'm very happy that I that I got there in the end.
Yeah, I just wanted to jump in on just like on a more personal level, like just to like make it very concrete. Like, you're maybe a lot, I mean, you know, selection bias and all, you decide to click yes to attend this panel while there's an election going on. There's lots of other things competing for your attention. So you're probably thinking about, you know, there's a non-zero probability that you're thinking about an exit from academia or a PhD. And I think that's a really good thing. Like, that's actually very liberating, I've found. So like, just to make it concrete, like I was sitting in my 4th year, like probably in my bedroom, like trying to do work or something, like at 11 p.m. And I was just like, this is, you know, awful. And I am really not enjoying anything right now. And so like, I applied to actually the job that I'm in right now, and eventually like interviewed up until the final stage, and then, you know, didn't end up proceeding with it in the 4th year, because I was like, you know what, actually, like, I'm stubborn. I really like what I'm writing on, so I want to complete this. But I know that after this moment, like, I'm completely detached and divorced from whatever the final outcome is going to be. And I think part of what really felt very liberating was, one, not feeling like my entire life was dependent on the whims of a search committee, the whims of 3 reviewers who might be having a bad day. That, you know, just felt very good. And I think, you know, in the PhD, a lot of it hopefully does feel good, but a lot of it is not going to feel good. So the more things that make you feel good, the better. And the other thing that I think was really useful in that moment, you know, going from my 4th year into the 5th year, was that I had time to like rethink about like, what am I actually interested in? Like, what is it that I really want to do with my life? And I think there's so much about the PhD process that, you know, pinpoints you into a certain track. But I think it's like totally okay to, and this is how I am right now at this very moment, like sitting here, is like, I still don't really know like what my career trajectory is going to look like, what I really want to do. And like the, you know, position I'm in right now is I'm just going to like try to make up for lost time, you know, build up some sort of financial security so I can go really do what I really want to do. And I think that's a completely okay position to be in. Like, I think coming out of academia or the PhD, like, you don't actually need to know what you need to do for the rest of your life. Like, that was the case when you were trying to stay in academia, but it's no longer true. I think that's actually has been incredibly helpful for having perspective.
Thank you, Sham. So just note to people who are asking questions in the Q&A, these are great. Keep them coming. Thank you. We'll get to that in the next section. I just wanted to finish this kind of grad program section with several people who are actually faculty as faculty advisors. What can people do to kind of help their students, their advisees, kind of navigate this space? Like what kind of information you wish you had? What kind of advice do you wish you were given while you were in grad school?
I mean, again, I think universities are thinking about this much more now, and that's a great thing. But I think they will need outside advice because, like, as we know, like the faculties have a job, and some of them, it happens sometimes. That some faculty might have worked outside of academia in the past, but for many of them, that's the only thing they know, right? So they might be well-intentioned, have the best intentions in the world, but they're probably not the best person to give you that kind of advice as to how to move outside of academia. So I think departments that really care about that aspect will have to bring outside opinions and outside help in that regard.
Thanks, Charles.
So I think I have quite a few thoughts on this, because when I came out of grad school, you know, I see political science in particular has made a lot of progress on this in the last 10 years. Because when I kept attending conferences at first in 2012, 2013, people would literally look at me and say, "Why are you here?" And that no longer happens. For one thing, I've been around for a long time and people have figured out I'm not going away. But I don't perceive that happening as much anymore. So there is movement on this issue. As faculty, the most important thing that you could do is create an environment in which it's okay for your students to do this. You are in a position, especially, it's going to be most important if you're in a department where you know the attitude is hostile toward students going non-academic. It's really important for you to push back against that. Don't make students be the ones to come to you and say, is this an option? You know, especially now that we know jobs are going to be even more restricted than they have been for the last few years. You know, when I started grad school in 2006, life looked a whole lot better than it did when I finished in 2011, because, you know, the 2008 crash happened. And, you know, we've never recovered from that. The job market is still extremely tight. We haven't stopped producing an overage of PhDs. So be real about that. Tell your students what their options are up front, and don't let them do the guesswork. Now, you know, it is true that you may not be the best person for them to talk to, but that's where you as the advisor should be developing your network of former students, or other people's former students, or reaching out to people on Twitter to pull a panel together. You know, that's fantastic. You know, you do what you can to get resources for your students and get them connected, and you'll build that up over time. So that's what I would say to professors who are asking these questions.
Thank you, Natalie. Anybody else on that? Okay, so I guess like the next section deals with like very specific skills and just kind of broadly how to tailor, how to convert from an academic CV to, you know, a resume for the job market. Like how do you, just like from a very practical standpoint, people seem to be quite confused in terms of kind of, you know, how do you structure it? What do you put on there? Do you put teaching on there? If so, what do you highlight? If you put publications on there, how do you, like, it's obviously very different from an academic CV, and most people don't seem to have a grip on kind of where to even start with kind of producing their document. Does anybody have any tips on that front?
I mean, for that though, I think universities are becoming better at providing help as to how to build your resume. Of course, it's not the same, right? You're not going to send around a CV of like 7 pages long for jobs outside of academia. So, I mean, it's the same for academic job though, in the sense that you need to tailor it to the job you're applying for. But there's much more. It's a resume outside of academia is much less. An academic CV will look the same, right? Everyone has a CV that the format is the same, whereas for outside, for resume, the format can change. You can talk about your skills much more. Like you don't have, people shouldn't have to guess what the skills are. You can have your job and what's the skills that you've applied in that job, basically. Like it's much more different in terms of content, but there's also much more variance in the content that you can put in. So it's hard to answer that question generally because it really depends on what the job is and what the skills that the person has. But because again, the variance as to how you present that is much bigger outside of academia.
Thanks, Charles.
So I've actually been fairly active in helping people kind of convert their CVs to resumes. And the biggest thing that I think happens is, how do I show that I have work experience? How do I make my academic stuff look like experience? So what I tell people is that the first section of your resume, like just below your name and everything, should be called professional experience. Not work experience, not any professional experience. And that is a broader heading, and you can put under that research assistant for XYZ course, and then like a couple of bullet points of the very specific things you did, you know, that are applicable to the job you're applying for. And then if you have teaching experience, you can put it there. It's also professional experience. If you had an unpaid assistant portion of your assistantship, or you did some unpaid project management work in order to gain some experience, that goes under professional experience as well. That's kind of the magic of a professional experience header versus other wordings. And so you build out your graduate experience in that way. And then you also, if you have experience prior to graduate school, you work that in as well. So that's kind of the biggest thing I tell people, is to think about your professional experience as a holistic section, and don't just think, oh my God, I've only had a job as a research assistant. No, think about, you know, the specific experiences that has encapsulated.
Can I just say, like, maybe this is going back to the previous question about faculty, but like one of the things maybe you can do as a PhD student, I mean, it helped me get my job, is to kind of go out and like explore other issues and like other passions that you're into, right? Like you're interested in something, go volunteer, man. Like put in like a couple hours each week or something like that. Broaden yourself. Like I did research on campaign finance, and I went and worked for the Sunlight Institute for a summer. You know, like, is that the best use of my time? No, I should have been preparing for comps or like making my note cards or whatever. No, but like, I mean, I don't know, like it was interesting. I was like, you know, jazzed about the subject. And so I did it, right? That helped me find a job later down the road. So, I mean, like, I don't know, maybe faculty, like encourage your students, encourage the people that you're advising, like to kind of go outside of the little bubble of academia, right? To sort of build the things that you can put on a professional resume, right? Because that's what's going to get you hired. The volunteer work that I did for Los Angeles' YIMBY group is probably what got me this job that I got right now, right? And you know, my advisor was like, well, maybe my advisor a bud, so like, you know, I'm not bashing on him or anything, super legit guy. But like, you know, he was like, you should be focusing on your job market materials. You should be like, I don't know, working on the indentation of your cover letter or whatever they tell you, because that's what's going to separate you from the pile. You know, but like, didn't. So, I don't know. What do you got to lose?
Yeah.
I think that's really true. And also, at least for me, like I'd never had a job before the PhD, and it was actually surprising to me that I enjoy having a job, like a job that ends. I mean, not right now because it's, you know, the election, but like in normal times, it ends, and I get weekends and stuff, which I was never good at taking as a grad student, because I never felt like I had done enough during the week to earn my weekend. So like I think internships and stuff are great. Tech internships can, you know, you can make some money during the summer, but also it can, like, you know, teach you whether that's actually something you want to do as a job, and whether a more structured environment, especially for people that haven't had a more structured environment before, like is actually something that you enjoy and that could be conducive to your, you know, mental health, as it was for me. But also, another thing I wanted to say, one thing that I noticed, and I mean, I think it's really hard to generalize, like from my experience, both of my jobs that I applied for and got were like very specific, and I didn't, the ones that I didn't get, I don't know if I can learn anything from that either. But one thing I did notice is that people were very concerned, or were concerned about my ability to, you know, produce work quickly, like the timelines in academia, the fact that it takes, I think there are some people that are naturally very, that suits them well. They like taking their time over things. I'm actually really not like that. I get very antsy. I like sort of moving on and working on multiple smaller things, even if I go back to the same thing over time. And so that was, and I like sort of having pressure of colleagues who are waiting on something, waiting on an analysis or something. That's actually something that really helps me get work done. Just being left to my own devices, it turns out doesn't. But that was something that I think is very different for people, and that's something, if you know that you were like that, then that's something to stress, right? And also to put on your CV, to take this back to the CV thing. If you just say, oh, this is my paper, I wrote this paper, right? That people don't know what that entails. Like, did you find this data? Did you digitize this data? Did you like make this data accessible? What did you do? What were the components of this project that allowed you to write this paper? Like, when you break it down like that, it sounds much more like an actual job, right? Like with the skills that other employers want. I mean, I'm speaking quantitative here because that's sort of my experience, but like, you found this relevant data, you like digitized it, you developed a new method to analyze it that was better than a different method that other people had done before, whatever, like, and put those in the bullet points under your professional experience, and show employers that, because they don't know wrote a paper. What does that mean? I mean, that doesn't mean anything. So show them what it means, and tie it directly to the kinds of skills that they're looking for.
That's super helpful, Laura, because I was actually about to ask, kind of, you know, do academic publications matter? Do they not matter? Are they neutral? Do they drag you down? But I guess if you frame it in a context of like a project with some very specific things, I would assume that just puts a totally different new light on that.
People think that academic papers are like the research papers they wrote as undergrads. Like, straight up, I work with really smart folks, and most of them thought that. So really tell them what it's involved in making an academic paper.
Thanks, Dan. I guess the final section and batch of questions all have to do with networking and with like the how do you go about you know, reaching out to people, how do you make connections, how do you make connections during the time of COVID when like you're not really allowed to leave your house? So like there's like this added layer of complexity where you just like, are you cold emailing people? Like what's the process here? And I guess in academia, you know, we all complain about networking, and like the idea of networking that we all have is like the Palmer House lobby. Rest in peace, Palmer House, I guess. So like what are some very concrete advice that you can give to people in terms of like, how do you even go about trying to build a network? Are there like sites that like you go to? I'm assuming there's no just like e-jobs. Do you go on Indeed.com or other websites advertise on television? So all of these things have to do with just kind of networking and like the how of how do you get a job. So I'll turn it over to you guys.
Oh, go ahead, Natalie.
So I'll say a couple of things. So I've gotten 4 jobs outside of academia to this point, which, by the way, there was kind of an earlier point. I think Shom was making it of you know, you don't necessarily have to know what you want to do. If you get, that's the beauty of non-academic. If you get into something and it's not quite right for you, you go try something else. And so I've worked in, you know, kind of the alt academic, because Marist was located at a college, media / corporate and nonprofit industries. And I've gotten all of those jobs in different ways. So one thing you can do to start developing a network is professional conferences that are not solely academic. Quantitatively, you know, there's R studio conferences, there are all kinds of different R related things. I'm sure Python has the similar stuff. I'm most familiar with R. In qualitative work, you should look for, you know, specific things. I believe In Vivo runs its own conferences. You know, so things like that are good to help network. LinkedIn is honestly where I think the best job search engine is. It's where most people post. I got one of my jobs because a headhunter found me on LinkedIn. I had looked at the job and thought about applying for it and decided not to because I thought it was a little bit more advanced than I was in my career at the time. The headhunter reached out and said, "Hey, we think you would be good at this." I'm like, okay, who am I to argue? So I went through the process and ended up getting the job. Another way that I got my resume rose to the top of the pile in my first job because I put this really obscure software on my resume that I thought was very obscure, and it was a survey telephone interviewing software. And I was like, there's no way this matters, but I threw it on my technical skills anyway. Turns out it was the same software that they used, and they saw that on my resume, and it went to the top of the pile. So there is a bit of like luck and things involved as well. But in general, my 2 takeaways would be LinkedIn, you know, have your profile set up, have your skills listed, and you know, conferences and opportunities where you can meet non-academic people. It's challenging right now, but also the advantage of everything being virtual is that some of it is a lot cheaper, and you don't have to be able to afford the travel to go to it. That does make it more challenging to really make personal connections when it's a virtual conference, but you can start seeing the type of work.
Thank you, Natalie.
Another thing that I think can be useful is just to do kind of research interviews. You find someone who's outside, looks like someone who's doing a job that you're like, that's something I think I'd like to do, but you don't know. So you send that person an email and ask if you can have a chat. Like I get those emails from time to time and I'm happy to do so. Sometimes you just don't know. You're curious as to how that person got there, how to do that. Like you're like, that's my dream job. How do I get there? Well, you can ask that person how to get there, and that will give you a lot of information.
Yeah, on that point, especially like if you're, as like, you know, as Stan mentioned before, you know, increasingly a lot of places are going to be filled with these like PhD types, or that, you know, have done a PhD or like research oriented. And so like that'll be a connection. So it's like, it's hard now, but I think like if I were to make a prediction, since we're all making predictions this week, like that is a prediction I would feel pretty good about, is like, as you know, people start exiting from academia, a lot of them will be fellow travelers. So, you know, everybody on this panel, like, I think those are similar types of people are in other industries or occupations or areas as well. So I think that will make things easier, I hope. But also I wanted to say is that, like, you know, just emailing people, or I don't know, whatever method of communication, like a lot of people just want to talk about what they do. They like doing that, just like academics. I think that's kind of like a universal feature. And so I think a lot of people, like I've done it myself, I've been happy to chat with people about, you know, what I'm doing, how I got to where I am. And so I don't think I think the perceived barriers to doing that are actually not incredibly high. Like you can't probably, you know, email AOC, be like, how do I be you? That will probably not happen. But, you know, the rest of us people, mere mortals, will, you know, be more than happy to chat with you. And then I guess, again, on more like tactical advice, you know, like what are concrete things you can do? I mean, this was in like a pre-COVID world, and it wasn't really intentional. It was just like, you know, at places like, you know, whenever I went to APSA, I didn't want to spend all my time at a conference all day. Instead, so I would like have like, you know, organize a happy hour or something of people. And, you know, at these conferences, like people from lots of different industries, especially APSA, like there are lots of industry people that are in there too, like campaign folks, like go to APSA because a lot of the, you know, cutting edge research is coming out of, you know, university departments and, you know, the campaign world. So those folks are around, and they'll be at, like, everybody wants to socialize. Nobody wants to sit in, you know, a Palmer House room all day. So those are types of things. I mean, it requires being proactive. But, you know, I first kind of started doing just like cold emailing people, like, hey, wouldn't it be great if us people who are interested in left politics had a happy hour or something? You know, and then I would try to continue that and stuff like that. And there's also kind of other things where it's like, you know, it's harder to do in the COVID times, but this is actually a point that, again, Stan made, is like there are lots of volunteer opportunities right now. And I also want to be clear, like, you shouldn't do volunteer opportunities in the name of like, I'm doing this to get a job, because nobody likes that person. But if you're a human being, you probably have interests in something. And so you should, if you have the time and energy, like, you know, spend a couple hours a week working with that organization or group. So for me, it's been working with Data for Progress on some like, you know, political analysis type stuff, and volunteering a couple hours a week or so on that. And so there are opportunities, and, you know, inevitably that you forge connections, you learn about job opportunities. There are like specific, I'm happy to give like specific, you know, websites or posting boards, you know, now they're like Slack channels and stuff like that. But those are kind of things like, if you're someone who's proactive, like those are kind of, again, like tangible things you can do.
Yeah, I second the emailing thing. I'm someone who's really bad at emails, and so sometimes I don't respond, and that's on me entirely. I emailed Natalie actually a while ago when I was in grad school. You probably don't remember because you, but I emailed you because I was, you know, when I was in this stage, and I think Brad Spahn put us in touch. And you were super helpful, specifically about like turning a CV into a resume. And that was honestly like a really encouraging thing at the time, and made me feel I think I never followed up because I was a mess. But you know, it really on this end, like, it really helped me, and it was really nice. And you offered to like chat, and I was like, I can't talk to other humans yet. What? I don't know. I haven't emerged from my PhD hole. But feeling like that was an option was really nice. And I definitely second this just email people. And especially now with COVID, you know, it's actually easier to chat with people who are not in the same place as you. Everyone hates Zoom. You can bond over that too. You know, it's like everyone's in the same position. No one is happy about it. And everyone has sort of more time, hopefully. And yeah, I see a question in the Q&A that's if job opportunities in journalism are good. Journalism is a dying industry. Don't go into journalism because you think it'll give you like a long-term, you know, secure job. It really won't. You know, there are jobs, there are like specifically data journalism, if that's sort of your background, but also non-data journalism. There are often jobs, but it is high turnover, and you can't like rely on having a job sort of 5 months in the future. So, I mean, that is something definitely that I think a lot of people in academia, if you're thinking about it as a sort of like, oh, I'm gonna get a job that's gonna set me up for the next 40 years of my life, a lot of these other industries, and I think journalism specifically is one where that's just like, that's not going to happen. So that's something to be aware of, right? I mean, if long-term stability is your thing, I don't know, bureaucracy, like I'm Austrian, so bureaucracy is kind of my go-to for long-term stability. But like, you know, there's journalism is definitely not for you, and neither is political campaigns, which are the two things I've done.
Let me second that. I used to be a newspaper reporter before I decided to jump into the land of plenty in academia, and there are no jobs in newspapers anymore. So don't do that.
Thanks, Dan. I want to highlight the emailing thing, and it's just good advice for if you want to give academia a shot as well. Like, that's something that when I was coming out of my program, like, nobody really tells you, at least none of the people that were in my circle told me, like, that you really can do that. And I noticed that after I started my postdoc, that people that came from other programs were just like, they were just emailing people all the time, people that they didn't know. And that's something that you should be doing. And, you know, I literally, other than Charles, I have never met anybody on this panel in person, right? Like, I don't know any of you. I just sent you a Twitter message, and you were all very nice and responded. And now we have this panel. So I think, like, this is really, like, people like many of you have said, like, people like to talk about what they do. And when you reach out and you're being nice and you're being sincere, like, there's absolutely no reason that you're not going to hear back from somebody. Yeah, like, if you email like The Rock or something, he might not respond. He's pretty busy. But like, in general, most people will have, you know, will give you the time and briefly at least respond and connect. So I definitely want to highlight that point. Any other final thoughts? I guess we have 5 minutes left. Any other final thoughts, any kind of advice that you would give to people who are trying to position themselves in the best possible way for a career outside of academia?
This is kind of a dumb thing, and I don't really like that I'm saying this, but I have found Twitter to be quite helpful. I've gotten job offers based on Twitter threads that I did, which I did not think was a thing. Like, when I was in grad school, I did not tweet. I lurked a lot, and I sunk a lot of time into that website, but without, you know, actually saying anything. And then when I got into journalism, I started tweeting, and it's surprising that it's actually really impactful. And sometimes you tweet something and then it becomes a right-wing conspiracy, which sucks. But, you know, sometimes sometimes it gets you job offers. So I don't know. I mean, it's sort of a high risk, high reward type of thing. Don't be a dick on Twitter is sort of always good advice. I try not to, you know, like dunk on people or whatever. But it is a good way of getting your research out there and of engaging with other people. And like, a lot of, especially academics, are like really nice and like good to engage with. And especially if you keep things factual and you keep things sort of on a friendly level, it can also suck, right? Especially if you're, you know, not a white man, but it can be great, and it is really a place that can get you opportunities. So that is something to keep in mind.
Oh yeah, I kind of wanted to. I mean, I also feel very badly saying this because I have mixed feelings about Twitter.com, but for instance, like I think there is a real art to being able to convert your research into a Twitter thread. Like that is a very tangible thing you can do, and you'll find like people really want to engage. Like not even academics, it's like people are curious, they want to engage with you, they want to learn more. And so those are just great ways to like, you know, get your work out there. People will appreciate it. People will care. So like if you need like instant validation, sometimes like that'll do it. But I also want to say like for me, it's also like help me hone like my own research too. So even if you're someone who's like you're not set on going which way or the other, like academia or non-academia, it does help you figure out, like sometimes I figure out like actually after writing this thread about this paper, I figured out that the actual point of this paper is X and not Y. And so sometimes that's helpful. And also it's, for me as well, has led to opportunities. I've had to, you know, I had one thread, I was like, hey, I'd be interested in, at the end, I was like, I'd be interested in doing more of this type of work. If you are also interested, like, let's talk. And then, you know, the editor from, one of the editors from 538 reached out. And that's how I have gotten, working with them now. So I think there are like pros that you can, and I think there are, like, that's something that's good about it, but it's also bad in the sense of like, it can also like, there is such thing as too much consumption of social media. So yeah, I would just make sure like you balance it. But
thanks, Sean.
I'll do a quick round robin of a couple of things that I see in the questions. There's a salary question, and that is something to consider. We mentioned being able to live where you want to live. Salary is also a big piece of the picture, but it's hugely variant depending on the industry you're in. If you go into a data science job at a large corporation, you're going to start at 6 figures easily. If you're doing an alt academic job as, you know, like a staff position at the library, you're going to be on a similar scale as faculty. And there's a lot in between that, of course. Mm-hmm. So it's really dependent on where you want to go and what you want to do. In general, like right now, I've been up and down, but I probably am doing better than a lot of my peers, but I'm also in a large city, so balance that out. The other thing is, if you really, really, really enjoy teaching, don't think you have to give that up. I teach at American University, 1 course a semester. I taught at Marist College when I lived up there. So you don't have to give that up if that's a key thing that you're still interested in, and that's one of the things you're like hanging on to. Adjuncts are always needed. And have I ever regretted not going into academia? No, not for a second.
Thanks.
Can I just make like a bigger, broader point? Like, you know, one of the things when you start looking for a job outside of academia, like, it's difficult too. Like, I'm not going to say like non-academic jobs are just falling from the trees and you just show up with your PhD and everyone's going to be throwing job offers at you. Like, in a lot of ways, it's as difficult as getting an academic job. Like, the sort of stuff that goes into it, the interview process, the preparations you got to do is kind of the same. But the difference is the denominator is so much better, or so much bigger and better when you're on the non-academic market, right? Like, you're going to not get every job you apply for, but that's cool because there's 100 jobs out there. There's 200 jobs. So like, you know, put yourself out there, like reach out to folks. Don't be afraid to fail. If someone doesn't email you back, it's on them. Like, maybe they're just not a cool person, right? So like, put yourself out there, be cool, like, you know, exert positivity into the world and it will come back to you.
Thanks, Dan. Any other final words of wisdom from anybody else? All right, guys. Well, thank you so much for doing this. You guys are all stars. I'm sure people are really appreciative of all of your advice. And I think the lesson here is that we just need to do a lot more of these things for people to really kind of get a grip on the options they have and kind of how to navigate that world. But yeah, thank you so much. And I'll see you all on Twitter.
Did they call it while we were here?
I didn't pay attention. I was being a good host. I don't have my devices on.
Okay.
They did not.
Okay.
Well, thank
That's
you
good.
again.
Okay.
Thanks, guys.
Okay, bye.
See you, everyone.